what would be my ideal loads or percentage work? If what has the research drawn in terms of conclusions?
So I'll go back to my comment that when you're asking me an applied question, I'm going to give you kind of a general answer that it depends. And what I will say with that is you can, the research now, so this is an area where I can give a very definitive opinion that, and there's compelling evidence to this, that the research really compellingly shows you can gain muscle over a very wide spectrum of loading ranges. We have some recent research that shows under about 30% 1RM seems not to be as effective, although there's even another study that contradicted our study. But let's even say, let's go with that. 30% 1RM is like 50 plus reps. Depends on the exercise, but can be anywhere from 50 RM. So a very, very high load, very light load. And anything, let's say between, I would give you a kind of let's even say a more reasonable repetition range, because who's going to want to do, I don't think there's any reason you need to do 50, but let's even say anything from 3 to 5 up to 30 repetition max, provided you are training with a high level of effort, meaning that you're coming at least close to muscle failure. And assuming you're doing that, you can gain muscle at all of those rep ranges. Now, to me, I think, and this is one of the more intriguing areas of which that I'm currently pursuing a study that should be carried out hopefully shortly, but whether there is a fiber type specific response, meaning that does, let's say, light loads have greater effects on type 1 muscle fibers, which are your endurance-based fibers, and does your heavy loads have greater effects on your type 2 fibers, which would be your strength type fibers.
Fast twitch,
your fast twitch, right. And we don't really, there is some evidence that that's the case at this point, but it's still far from being, in my opinion, far from being definitive in any way. And if true, then that would have good implications for training, interesting implications, both for athletics and for bodybuilding. And I would say at this point, based on that, if your goal is maximizing hypertrophy, I think there is benefit to training across a spectrum of repetition ranges, meaning that you do some work in, let's say, the 3 to 5 rep range, or at least 5, somewhere in the 5. 10 rep range, 8 to 12, and then going up around 20 to 25 maybe. So you would kind of at least touch all bases on the potential for maximizing fiber type development if that is in fact the case.
Yes. So basically the science is telling us that the body does not know how to count. It only equates effort. And when we say effort, do we say in terms of and I'm probably really going to speak in layman's terms here, but I don't care. It's just the what do you really encapsulate as effort? Would it be the idea of not being able to do one more, so going to failure, or feeling the burning sensation, or both?
Proximity to failure.
Proximity to failure.
Yeah, so a colleague of mine named Eric Helms, another really astute fitness pro that everyone out there should follow.
Yeah.
He did his doctoral research in a concept called repetitions in reserve, RIR, which is basically how many reps are you short of failure. And he actually validated this concept where people, when they're taught how to estimate, they're able to say, all right, I could have done 1 more rep. I could have done 2 more reps. And that's where you want to me, using this RIR technique, how many reps are you short of failure? And an RIR of 1 to 2, depending on the rep range you're training in. So now if you're training at a 5 RM, let's say 2 reps short of failure is going to be a lot different than if you're at a 15 RM, being 2 reps short of failure. But anyway, somewhere in that, assuming your loads are, let's say, 6 to 20, 1 to 2 reps short of failure at maximum would be what I would consider a high level of effort.
And if I'm doing, for instance, 4 sets of each exercise, should I do that type of intensity or effort in all of them?
Well, no. Should you? These are, again, it depends question. It really depends on how the whole routine is structured. And the question also is, do you need to train to failure at all? I generally think there is potential benefit to doing it. There is still, the research is very hazy on whether it is requisite, whether it's required. But without that hard evidence. To me, you have to base it on on logic, on personal expertise. And I do feel that, maybe going on the last set to failure most of the time seems to have benefits. But the other sets, could there be a set or two that's a little less? I mean, maybe 3 RIR, yeah. But the majority of sets should be, that's the generalization I can make, is that your majority of your sets, depending upon many things as the structure of your routine, should be within an RIR of 1 to 2, or 0 to 2.
Okay. And what about the DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness? A lot of people have the idea in mind that they have to really go home and feel like exhausted or not even walk for the next couple of days. Is that really necessary to get the most gains?
No, not only is it necessary to really trash yourself is counterproductive, because then you're going to compromise your ability to train in your next session, and that's never a good. If you're not going to be able to train with your full intensity, that's never a good thing. Now, the question then arises: is some degree of muscle soreness beneficial, or not soreness? Well, soreness is somewhat equated to, even that's not a really great marker for muscle damage. It's
very individual as well. Some people
never get sore and still experience some damage. So when it comes to damage, is let's say a moderate level of damage beneficial, where it's not debilitating, it's kind of mildly sore, if you will, if you're going to use soreness. But there's, let's say, some mild to moderate, somewhat moderate muscle damage. Is that does that help enhance the hypertrophic response? And that's a question that remains to be answered. I know there's people on both sides that have more definitive opinions. I think that anyone who's trying to make a definitive opinion is not basing it on hard evidence. They're basing it more on just their own opinion, what they feel, on personal bias, I would say, because we don't have any. You can't draw causality based on the data that we have. It's all based on really theoretical constructs, on some basic research into things like what are the effects of muscle damage on satellite cells, what are their effects on, which are, satellite cells help to repair muscles and also donate their nuclei for more protein production, and on other things like myokines, which are substances that muscles produce that can be used as growth factors. So whether they actually enhance the effect of the contractions by themselves, those are questions that we don't know, and that probably is going to be a good while before we get some clear evidence on that, just because it's an extremely difficult, if not, I think at this point, almost impossible topic to really study in a controlled fashion.